The rain had been falling since early morning, turning the city streets into a blur of headlights, umbrellas, and reflections, when Daniel Reed received a call that would change his life forever. He was sitting behind the wheel of his old black sedan, waiting outside the courthouse because his manager had asked him to pick up the company's CEO after an important legal meeting. Daniel had worked as a senior driver and executive assistant for Sterling Global for nearly 6 years, and although his official title was Executive Transportation Coordinator, everyone in the company knew him simply as the quiet man who was always there when someone needed help. He never complained, never demanded attention, and never expected special treatment. At 32, Daniel lived modestly in a small apartment, drove an 8-year-old car, and spent most of his free time taking care of his younger sister, Emily, who was finishing college. What almost nobody at Sterling Global knew was that Daniel had once been offered a senior management position at another company, but he had turned it down because he wanted to stay close to his family. He also carried a secret that had lasted for years. He had loved his CEO, Victoria Sterling, since the day he first met her. Victoria was 36, brilliant, beautiful, disciplined, and intimidating. She had built Sterling Global from a struggling family business into one of the most respected technology companies in the country, and everyone admired her strength. But Daniel had seen another side of her, the woman who stayed alone in her office after midnight, the woman who secretly cried after losing her mother, the woman who sometimes ate dinner at her desk because she was too busy to go home. He had never confessed his feelings because Victoria was married, and Daniel had always believed that loving someone sometimes meant respecting the life they had chosen, even when it broke your heart. That morning, however, Victoria walked out of divorce court alone. Daniel immediately stepped out of the car and opened the rear door for her, but she didn't move. She stood beneath the courthouse awning, staring at the rain as if she had forgotten where she was. Her expensive black suit was perfectly tailored, but her face looked exhausted. "Miss Sterling?" Daniel asked gently. Victoria finally looked at him. "Daniel." Her voice was quieter than usual. "You came. I was asked to pick you up." She gave a small, bitter smile. "Of course you were." She got into the car, and Daniel closed the door. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Daniel drove carefully through the wet streets, while Victoria stared through the window. Her divorce had officially been finalized that morning after 3 years of separation from Richard Cole, a wealthy investor who had married Victoria when she was still building her company. Their marriage had looked perfect from the outside, but behind closed doors, Richard had constantly criticized her, demanded control over her decisions, and eventually betrayed her with another woman. Victoria had spent years trying to save something that had already died. Now it was over. "Take me home," she finally said. Daniel nodded. "Yes, ma'am." But after a few seconds, she changed her mind. "No." "Take me somewhere else." "Where?" "Anywhere." Daniel glanced at her through the mirror. "Do you want somewhere quiet?" Victoria nodded. "Please." He drove her to a small park overlooking the river, a place far from the financial district. Daniel had discovered it years earlier when he needed somewhere peaceful after his father died. He parked beneath a large tree, and Victoria stepped out. The rain had become a light mist. They walked toward a wooden bench overlooking the water. "You know," Victoria said, "everyone congratulated me today." Daniel looked at her. "For the divorce?" "Yes." She laughed softly, but there was no happiness in it. My lawyer said I should celebrate. My friend said I should feel free. My employees probably think I should be relieved. She looked down at her hands. But I feel like I lost. Daniel sat beside her, leaving enough distance to remain respectful. Maybe you didn't lose, he said. Maybe you finally stopped losing yourself. Victoria turned toward him. Why do you always know what to say? Daniel smiled faintly. I don't. I just say what I believe. She stared at him for several seconds. That's the problem. What is? You always tell me the truth. Daniel looked away. Someone should. She smiled for the first time that day. Do you remember the night my mother died? Daniel nodded. You drove me to the hospital. Yes. I was terrified. I couldn't think. I didn't know what to do. Everyone around me was giving orders, asking questions, making decisions. But you didn't. Daniel remained silent. You just sat there, she continued. You didn't tell me everything would be fine because you knew it wouldn't be. You didn't tell me to be strong. You just stayed. Daniel swallowed. You needed someone. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. You always stayed. Daniel looked at her, and for a moment he wanted to tell her everything. He wanted to say that every late-night phone call, every airport pickup, every difficult day, every silent conversation had mattered to him. But he knew the timing was wrong. You should go home and rest, he said instead. Victoria suddenly laughed through her tears. There you go again. What? Running away. Daniel frowned. I'm not running. You are? She stood up and faced him. You've been doing it for years. Daniel's heart began pounding. Miss Sterling, Victoria. He looked at her. Victoria. She took a breath. Why didn't I choose you? Daniel froze. The question hung between them like thunder. What? You heard me. She stepped closer. Why didn't I choose you? Daniel didn't know what to say. Because you were married. Before Richard? She asked. Daniel's eyes widened. What do you mean? Victoria looked down. Before I married Richard, you were already in my life. You were there when I was struggling. You were there when my company nearly collapsed. You helped me prepare presentations at 2 a.m. You remembered my mother's birthday when I forgot it. You knew when I was pretending to be okay. She looked directly into his eyes. And you never asked for anything. Daniel's voice was barely audible. You were my boss. That didn't stop me from noticing you. Daniel stood slowly. Victoria. She shook her head. I noticed everything. The way you looked at me when you thought I wasn't watching. The way you always made sure I ate lunch. The way you defended me when people called me difficult. The way you never once tried to take advantage of my weakness. She smiled sadly. And I still chose Richard. Daniel looked at the river. You loved him. I thought I did. Silence followed. Then Victoria said something Daniel had never expected to hear. I think I chose him because I was afraid of choosing you. Daniel turned back to her. Why? Because with Richard, I knew what I was getting. Money. Status. Power. A man who understood the world I lived in. She paused. With you, I didn't know what would happen. Daniel's eyes softened. You were afraid. Terrified. She laughed sadly. You made me feel safe, Daniel. And that scared me more than anything. Daniel looked down. I'm not some perfect man. I know. I don't have your money. I know. I can't give you the lifestyle Richard gave you. I don't want it. He stared at her. What do you want? Victoria stepped closer. You? Daniel's heart seemed to stop. Before he could answer, his phone rang. It was his sister, Emily. He answered immediately. Hey, Em. Her voice sounded worried. Daniel, can you come home? Something happened. His expression changed. What happened? I'll explain when you get here. Victoria watched him closely. Is everything okay? Daniel ended the call and looked at her. My sister needs me. Victoria nodded. Then go. I should take you home first. No, she smiled. For once, let me take care of myself. Daniel hesitated. Are you sure? Yes. She reached into her handbag and pulled out her car keys. I'll drive. Daniel frowned. You're emotionally exhausted. Then I'll drive slowly. She smiled. Besides, I have something to think about. Daniel nodded and left. But Victoria didn't drive home immediately. She sat in her car and watched his vehicle disappear into the distance. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about stock prices, investors, lawsuits, or business. She was thinking about the man who had quietly loved her without demanding anything in return. The next morning, Daniel arrived at Sterling Global expecting an ordinary workday. Instead, the receptionist told him Victoria wanted to see him immediately. When he entered her office, she was standing beside the window. Close the door, she said. Daniel did. You wanted to see me? Victoria turned around. I'm changing your position. Daniel's face became serious. Did I do something wrong? No, she smiled. You're becoming director of executive operations. Daniel stared at her. What? You earned it years ago. Victoria, I can't accept this because of... This has nothing to do with what happened yesterday. She walked toward him. You are qualified. I checked your work history last night. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You checked my work history? I discovered something interesting. She placed a folder on the desk. You graduated top of your class in business administration. You turned down 3 management positions. You have certifications in logistics, finance, and corporate operations. You have been doing work far below your qualifications. Daniel looked at the folder. I never told anyone. Why? I needed a stable job. Victoria nodded. Then you should have told me. I didn't want special treatment. Victoria smiled. That's exactly why you're getting this promotion. Daniel laughed softly. You're impossible. And you're stubborn. She paused. But there's one more thing. What? I'm resigning as CEO. Daniel's smile disappeared. Why? Because I've spent 10 years building a company and almost no time building a life. She looked at him. The board will appoint someone temporarily while I take 6 months away. Daniel stared at her. What are you going to do? I'm going to learn how to live without being afraid. Daniel smiled. That sounds difficult. It is. She stepped closer. But I think I finally found the right person to teach me. Daniel looked into her eyes. Victoria, are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Months later, Victoria returned to Sterling Global, but she was different. She wasn't less ambitious or less powerful. She was simply happier. Daniel had become director of operations, and had transformed several failing divisions within the company. Their relationship had grown slowly, carefully, and honestly. There were no secret affairs, no scandals, and no rushed promises. They started with coffee, then dinners, then long walks. Victoria learned Daniel's favorite songs. Daniel learned that Victoria hated roses but loved wildflowers. She learned to laugh at herself. He learned to let someone care for him. One evening, almost a year after the divorce court, Daniel drove Victoria back to the same riverside park where she had asked him the question that changed everything. She stepped out of the car and smiled. "Why are we here?" Daniel reached into his pocket. "Because I have a question." Victoria's eyes widened. "Daniel," he smiled and took her hand. "You once asked me why you didn't choose me." She nodded. "I remember. I think I know the answer now." "What is it?" "Because we weren't ready." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "And now?" Daniel opened a small box. "Now I think we are." Victoria covered her mouth as he knelt before her. "Victoria Sterling, I don't want to be the man you chose because your marriage failed. I don't want to be your second chance. I want to be the man you choose because you finally know exactly what you want." She cried openly now. "Daniel, will you choose me?" She laughed through her tears and nodded. "Yes. This time I choose you." Daniel stood, and she wrapped her arms around him. The rain began falling softly around them, just like the day they had stood outside the courthouse, but this time neither of them felt lost. Victoria had once believed that love was about choosing the strongest person, the richest person, or the person who could protect her reputation. Daniel taught her that real love was different. It was the person who stayed when there was nothing to gain, the person who knew your weaknesses and never used them against you, the person who didn't demand to be chosen but waited until you were ready to choose freely. And as they stood together beside the river, Victoria whispered the words Daniel would remember for the rest of his life. "I should have chosen you years ago." Daniel smiled and kissed her forehead. "Maybe," he said, "but then we wouldn't have known how special this moment was." They walked back toward the car hand in hand, leaving behind the rain, the courthouse, the failed marriage, and every painful decision that had brought them there. For the first time, Victoria wasn't walking toward a life someone else had planned for her. She was walking toward the life she had finally chosen, and this time, she didn't have to walk it alone.